You know, when. No. Okay, welcome everybody to the October meeting of the Boulder Housing Advisory Board. I'm Michael Lucchese, the chair. And I will call this meeting to order, and we'll start with roll call. I can see that we have a quorum. We have a couple of members who will be attending late via Zoom, but let's start with Danny Teodoro. He is not here yet. Our Vice Chair Julianne Ramsey. Here. Philip Ogren, who's also zooming in late. And Karen Clearman. Here. Harry Pamos. Here. Karen Hoskin.
Karen here.
Karen, sorry, I really try on that.
I get it.
Karen Hoskin, now I got it. And I got everybody there. We also have Laura Kaplan, our liaison to the Boulder Planning Board, staff, Boulder staff, Steve Boulder and Jay Lignett. Okay, I'm gonna review the agenda and then we'll get into it. Agenda reviews, item number 2. We'll have the make sure I have the right agenda here. We'll be approving the minutes from August 23rd and September 27th. After that, we'll be having a public participation period. Usually about 6:05 and is present. That's item 4. Item number 5 is matters from the board. We'll talk about a letter from the council. We generally send a letter to council every year before the retreat. We'll have a new-ish council coming in, so it'll be really important to make a strong letter to them. Item B is to reschedule the November HAB meeting, and this ran to this last year too, because of Thanksgiving, we folded November and December into one meeting, and we're proposing doing that on December 6th. That will be a decision for the board to make tonight. Let's see, I think this is supposed to say cancel November meeting, but it says cancel December meeting on item C. Doesn't matter which, and then we'll have some updates, including the airport Boulder Junction phase 2, and Karen Clearman and Terry Pamos have some thoughts they'd like to share. Item 6 and others will be welcome to as well. Item 6 will be matters from staff, and item 7 debrief, meeting and calendar check, and then we will try to adjourn by 8 p.m. So that brings us to item 3, approval of minutes from August 23rd and September 27th, 2023. Do I have a motion? We need to do that one at a time, or can we do it? Okay. I have a motion. Second. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously among board members present. Before we get to public participation, I'll ask Jay of our staff to review the rules of public participation, and then we'll see if anybody is in the waiver we talk to.
Well, we'll skip the going over the rules if no one's.
Okay, so there. Wow, let's move it. This meeting is going fast. Item 5, matters from the board. Letter council. I don't have a whole lot more to say than some introduction, but I will be drafting a letter for everyone's review. The timing is a little different than non-election years because the new council takes a little longer to get settled. I believe you told me that the retreat is in March. Okay, so I think we're looking at getting them the letter in December.
Probably be later than that,
Later,
January and February. So the new council, they have to form a subcommittee to plan the retreat. And typically they're the ones that would request the letter from the different boards and commissions.
Great.
And say what it is, but my suggestion is for the board to start talking about what are the priorities of this group.
Okay. We can do that tonight. Before we get to that, I'll mention, and I put this in a note last week, that I think HAB accomplished a lot in the last year, or at least we made recommendations that people listened to. And there have been a lot of changes in housing policy. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be thoughtful about that, and we weigh in and work with planning board and council. I think they really appreciated it. It's a result of the significant changes to ADU policies, occupancy, and more. So I, really interesting. I'm not going to get too much into politics, except to note that, seems like everyone running for council is pro housing. It's just not fashionable to say, I don't want more housing in Boulder anymore. There's probably great grades of that. There are folks who are super pro housing and super pro affordable housing, and other folks that are maybe a little more cautious, but I don't think we're going to get a council that will try to reverse what's been done. I have a feeling that will maybe try to improve it, to tweak it, and that could be part of our role moving forward. Like, how can we make zoning for affordable housing better? You know, we can also be watchful and see how some of these programs are going, whether they're being used, whether they're being effective. So I'll open that up to our board members to discuss. What do you think could be important to put into a letter to council? Anyone who's not eating.
I have a topic that I want to suggest that this board explore. But given that we haven't sort of approved that topic, I don't know, maybe we talk about the letter to the council after some updates, but I can just tell you what my idea is.
Yeah, I think that was good.
All right, great. So I'm relatively new to this board, and my understanding is that you've had a lot of success with promote, like doing investigations and recommending the ADUs, and that's been accepted, and that there has been a push towards more middle income, the missing middle housing. And I think that there's been talk about the airport site as a potential solution to that issue. And so what I would like for us to explore is ways that we can create less expensive costs of a unit. Because my understanding is that there's been some recent affordable housing developments where the cost per unit is somewhere around $700,000 a unit. And it's really hard to do affordable housing when one unit to build in a multifamily complex is $700,000. And so I would like, if we can sort of explore things like smaller units, like maybe SROs or micro units, or some sort of creative where there's like potentially adaptive reuse of an office where maybe some of the units don't have windows, or there's smaller units on the windows and more like common space in the middle, or maybe they share a bathroom, or maybe they don't. But it seems to me that it's going to be really hard to build a lot of affordable housing if new construction is $700,000. So moral of the story is, or whatever, I would like to see if we can start exploring ways of reducing the $700,000 cost.
Very good topic. Others want to have some thoughts, but let others go first.
You're looking for reactions?
Reaction, add on to what Karen has introduced.
I guess I would ask maybe if staff have an opinion about what's driving the high cost of housing in Boulder. When we talk about it at planning board, we often talk about the main factor that is driving the high cost of housing is just the cost of purchasing the land or whatever the building is that you're going to be rehabbing. And, you know, Boulder has some pretty strict deconstruction standards and energy efficiency standards that do raise the cost of a unit somewhat, but my understanding was the primary driver is just the initial cost to purchase, because we're land limited, right? We don't have large swaths of unbuilt land. I don't know, Jay or Terry, if you have anything about that.
I would agree with you. I mean, land cost is the biggest cost and the reason why it's been escalating as much as it has, but also just materials, labor, everything, inflationary pressures. Terry can go into more detail. But I would also just add that, you know, the regulatory environment in Boulder also adds to it.
Yeah.
So all the energy requirements, you know, all the good things that we like to see, the high design, you know, materials, high quality materials, all that stuff.
It's everything. It's everything. It all adds up. The land is definitely a big issue. You can mitigate land by adding more units and density and whatnot, so the land cost per unit goes down with more density. But here's an example. You build a house, any type of dwelling unit here, the energy requirements, solar, sprinklers, this, that, high efficiency furnaces, the insulation packages, All that stuff is probably 15% more than 10 minutes down the road. Just that. And then land, and then the permit fees, crazy. More than anybody would ever imagine what you pay for permit fees. Some of that's inclusionary zoning sometimes, some of it's just the permit fees. Then you almost always need an architect, because there's not like cut and paste plans that you can go down to the city of Boulder with and just submit them like you're in the middle of nowhere. So that's a lot of money. It can be a lot of money for architects and engineering and all that stuff. Deconstruction, if there's a building there already, twice as much. Because you try to recycle, and I can talk about this all night, but you try to recycle, every piece of concrete and every piece of wood. If you go out and watch this happening, you're like, oh my, but that's the rules. So it all adds up. It all adds up. And that's what makes it very expensive.
So I totally get the land cost. And I agree with Terry that we can't really change the land cost, but the cost per unit can be reduced if you make smaller units.
Yep.
But then I guess Jay and I were talking, I think at the last meeting, about the new facility out at Arapahoe where there's going to be construction of like modular homes on site, which may or may not reduce some of the costs. So like these are all, like, I don't think there's one solution. There may be sort of a multitude of solution. And I don't know, has there been an exploration of reduced permitting fees or reduced other things if it's going towards affordable housing?
It seems like that, so you're proposing this as a discussion topic? Yes, because it seems, I mean, I support that, because it seems like that just barely touched on the surface, saying that, yeah, this is a big topic and maybe we can dig into it and come up with a possibility.
I think that would be a really interesting topic to say, there are all the things, here's the breakdown of what contributes to the cost of housing, like you were just doing off the top of your head, which is amazing, but like, here are all the things that contribute to why housing costs more in Boulder than 10 minutes down the road. And then look at each piece and are there things that would be effective and efficient to do for various pieces and try to find, I know the planning department has tried to look at some of the regulations and regulatory processes and where can we streamline, like don't require use reviews for certain things, for example, and that reduces the use review fees. But is there more of that could be done if you kind of break it down piece by piece and think about all the things that we do that ratchet it up? I think that's a great suggestion.
I think it's a great idea.
Love it. Okay, well, I have a few more thoughts. This land thing is big, obviously. I would love it if the city could be persuaded to look at opportunities to donate land. And really remove that land basis. I'm not really clear the city's land holdings and whether those opportunities exist, but I know there's some parking lots. Oh, Bill Program is here. Welcome, Bill. Can you hear us?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you loud and clear. We are up to item 5 on the agenda A, which is not as far along as it seems. And we're discussing topics of the letter to council, which would be due to the new council in probably early 2024. And Karen Clairman introduced the subject of how can we reduce the cost of building even multifamily housing, which we've heard it might be 700,000 per home. Awfully hard to get affordability at that rate. So we've started to talk about how perhaps to bring land costs down. It's something I'm just using on a moment. I'm wondering if the city might have any surplus lands they'd be willing to donate for the cause of affordable housing. That's part of the reason I was keep on nagging about the airport, because it's 180 acres. I don't know if that discussion is going anywhere, but maybe there's other opportunities. The city did do a facility survey. I think it was earlier this year. They have done an inventory of their facilities, and I've been in touch with Michelle Crane and said, what do you think? Are there any surplus properties? And she said, not really. There's some we're thinking of selling, because we need money to complete Alpine Balsam. But I think that is worth more investigation and discussion. The other thing that occurs to me is that when there's an opportunity to do a mixed-use building, cities should do that. I think the design of the new library in North Boulder is really nice, but it's kind of disappointing that it's basically a one-story building. You could have had 2 stories of housing above that. So opportunities like that, I mean, that's basically the same as free land. And the third thing that I harped on a little bit in the past is something we can do with incentivizing zoning to convert bad land use parking lots that aren't used, for example, into housing sites. And I think we actually have an example of that with what's happening at Diagonal Plaza. So, but could you do something that really led to, 10 more of those Diagonal Plaza type projects? Terry Thomas has brought this up. And why can't you just go all up and down 28th Street where you have underused commercial properties and redeveloping this mixed use, multi-story buildings with housing? So those are my ideas.
Michael, can I just tag on to that quickly, that I know that TAB either has or is considering sending a letter to city council with some recommendations, and one of them is eliminating parking minimums, which would go towards reusability of parking lots or freeing up that land to be more available for housing. So I don't know if you wanted to talk to TAB about that, or maybe like cross support what TAB is doing.
Just read, and I think it was in today's Cameron, I guess, column, that New York City has parking minimums. Like, really? Like, nobody owns cars. That's yeah, and I think there was another discussion about not requiring additional parking or parking permits in single family neighborhoods that really don't have.
I'm not aware of that one, but it seems like there's some crossover between your interest in reusability of parking and TAB's interest in minimizing.
Okay. So, why don't we have a bigger discussion about this in December, and everyone bring ideas and start developing, at least moving towards some kind of policy recommendation for our new council, or at least some ideas to put into a letter.
Can I piggyback on that last point?
I'm sorry.
Can I piggyback on that last point? Yeah, I don't think I have the right vocabulary for this. This is kind of a brainstorm that I've tried a couple times to start, but along the lines of considering parking and parking minimums and regulating that, I think it would be nice to have another tool of some sort that had to do with covenants around leases and parking from the housing point of view. Just one example of this is thinking about David Adamson's co-op on North Street. And, he's contemplating having the residents there sign covenants for car ownership and agreeing to share cars. And I like that as an approach to minimize the impact of gentle infill, so that if you're going to have a property that's going to have kind of like more intensity on it, to have maybe it can all be done through the parking regulations, but to me it seems like maybe there's a complementary tool that we could create that has to do more with the lease or the living, the covenants of the people who live there agreeing to not own cars.
And that you're talking about people using a car share, or actually like sharing private vehicles, or is that what David is talking about?
Well, David's talking about having a car share that's either within that co-op or is part of the Colorado car share. I'm not sure where that sits right now, but yeah, I mean, I would be perfectly fine too with having if we were going to have like an ultra car light neighborhood built somewhere in downtown, or one of the at a new city center, it'd be nice to have a way to say, hey, if living here, you agree to not have a car. Or you use car shares, something.
So I
like
think
that.
we are talking about two complementary things. One is how to reduce parking in new development. And the other is how to recycle land where parking exists, surface parking, and is not used to capacity. I think there's some statistical evidence around that you know, our surface parking lots are substantially not full. Terry, did you have something?
If I can tag on to Philip's point there, we did recently have a project come through planning board. You know, every project that goes through site review that planning board administers has to talk about their transportation demand management plan. And sometimes that element includes how are they going to, I mean, it basically revolves around how are you going to encourage your residents to drive less, to use alternative forms of transportation. And sometimes it gets to like how many parking spots are they requesting? They're usually requesting a reduction in their required number of parking spots. And to justify that, we had one project that came through and said that as part of their lease, this was a student housing project, the students were required to either vouch that, and they had to sign this with their parents, that they did not have a car, that they had not brought a car with them to Boulder, or that they had a place to park it. They had either paid for a space, one of the spaces in that building's parking, or they could show that they had paid for a space in a different parking garage. And that was part of their lease requirements. So I think what you're talking about, we do have some examples of where that is being done. I don't know if the city has anything to do with it, but
That was one of the buildings in Boulder.
yeah, I don't remember if that was the Millennium or if it was a different, it might have been the student housing project that they're wanting to do at Baseline and 28th. I don't remember which building it was, but one of them, that was part of their transportation demand management proposal was we're going to require the students to either not bring a car or show us where they're going to park it. Because the concern, of course, is that the parking spills over into the neighborhoods and impacts the neighbors.
Yeah, it's very considerate.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're trying to get their project approved, but I thought that was a nice provision.
Cool.
I'll make another transportation comment. I'll try to steer us back to housing and that, but they're related. I'm starting to be impressed by how many people are getting around on e-bikes, like people that only use their cars for, including, this is obnoxious to some people, like 9-year-olds on. But I think, okay, that's obnoxious in a way, but on the other hand, the kids' parents are not driving the Land Rover around town. But I just wonder if the city is gonna get around to doing some kind of a study to see if this is actually has an impact on vehicle travel.
The e-bike incentive program, are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, you could apply to get a voucher for one from the city, and then they would give you that voucher, and I think they would like track your usage of it somehow over a year or two. But you get to pay for an e-bike out of it, so I think that's definitely a step. Maybe in a couple years, we'll see some statistics on that.
On a related topic, like I know they just put on Baseline, not just a dedicated bike lane and not a bike lane with those like stand-up, white things that fall over, but they literally put those cement blocks, and I'd be curious if someone's collecting data to notice whether the more there is a dedicated safe lane, whether that makes people feel safer and therefore more people are bike riding.
I biked by the Baseline today and there are Jersey barriers, which
Yeah.
are probably this high. And they're painted with, or
Nice.
something, there's public art,
Yeah,
not just
yeah.
bare concrete. I thought, wow, that is way better than those stupid, you know, rubbery things that stick up. But I wonder at some point whether, you know, there's a tipping point and this really makes a difference in talking about e-bikes instead of cars. It's like when I go to Ideal Market now, I used to be like the only person with a bike. Now I can't find a place to lock my bike. And those people are not just out for a joyride, they're for pleasure riding, they're going food shopping, a basic service.
Well, I
So-
feel like this is more
I
transportation
know.
than housing, but one last comment is that there are times when I've wanted to bike, but I won't be able to watch my bike the whole time when I'm doing something. And I don't want it stolen because it is an e-bike, and so I don't bike. So there needs to be some recognition of like improved safety so that your e-bike doesn't get stolen if you decide to bike.
I think it would be good for the police department to release statistics about when and how bicycles are being stolen, because I know lots of people who bike around constantly and have never had an issue with their bike, but some do get stolen. So is that happening overnight? Is it happening out of people's garages? Is it happening mostly on campus? Is it happening mostly if you have a certain kind of lock that's easily cut? Like what are the factors that contribute to bike theft so that people
Yeah.
can feel more safe?
Yeah.
So bringing it back to housing, something to keep, I love bikes, but something to keep an eye on is like, are we gonna see a reduction in demand for parking in a way that could benefit housing? And I don't know if that's something we want to put in a letter or not, but it's a good thing to think about.
Or is it cause and effect, right? Like if there's reduced parking, then more people will bike as opposed to more people are biking, therefore we need less parking. Like if parking costs $20 an hour, people are gonna park less. So like right now, I would say parking is very affordable in the parking garages and on the streets. And I know that like increasing parking will upset a lot of the businesses, but it is sort of that chicken and egg. So
Right. Laura, has planning board had any discussion about rezoning surface parking lots? Does it come up at all?
It came up in the East Boulder sub-community plan. And I think the decision there was just that the parking lots that were available, like we're in the Flatiron Business Park and that kind of area, and that there was some ability to encourage mixed use and housing, but just like plopping a building down in a parking lot where you're basically living in an office park or something like that, or living in a shopping center wasn't seen as being a really desirable housing product. And so I think that there is a lot of talk about redeveloping shopping centers so that they are multi-use, and have like housing above and that kind of thing. But just taking a parking lot, usually where you have a parking lot is just, it doesn't have any open space, any green space. Most of our, we have requirements in the building code that if you build residential, you have a certain amount of open space per unit. And so it just wasn't seen as a great opportunity, but that goes to this idea of what are the barriers in our code, and can some of those be changed? And on-site open space seems like it might be one of those things to take a look at. And when we did in the zoning for affordable housing, reduce some of those on-site open space requirements for certain types of multifamily development. Didn't eliminate it, but reduced it.
And of
Or
course,
used a different metric.
we've got some, we'd say declining shopping centers, Basemar, Sunrise Center is not so active, Diagonal Plaza is starting to be redeveloped. And again, I don't know how that translates into a policy discussion from HAB, but it seems like the future opportunity there. It's almost like land banking.
I definitely think that there is interest and momentum around the idea of redeveloping, that when these shopping centers are going to redevelop, and they're currently like a lot of like 1-story or maybe 2-story shopping centers, that there could be a better use of that land.
Bill, did you want to say anything about what might be something to put into a letter to the new council about future housing priorities? We can come back to it, need to think about it.
I didn't come to the meeting with prepared comments on it. I'm sorry.
No problem. Put you on the spot. The other thing that occurred to me is there might be some policies that council has adopted that are ready for some improvement, some tweaking. And I was reading through some of the candidates' thoughts about housing. And one of them said, why don't we tweak the new occupancy rules and only allow you to increase your occupancy if you agree to keep those, keep an affordable rental rate. And I actually ran into this person. I said, how would you do that? And they said, same way they do it with ADUs. You basically sign a piece of paper and you get a variance, and you have to agree to keep the price in a registered a range of affordability. I thought that was a pretty cool idea. And as you know, we approved we voted approval of increasing occupancy a few months ago, but it was with some reservations. That was one of my reservations, is that might not improve affordability because the landlords will just continue to charge the same rent per room or bed without, not subdivided by a larger number. So, I mean, that's just an example. I'm not saying that should be a recommendation, but there've been a lot of changes in the last year and we could be looking at some updates to ADUs, zoning, et cetera.
We don't have to go into it tonight, but we did talk at planning board. I actually made a recommendation when planning board looked at occupancy to ask staff to look at tying it to affordability. And I think there's some pretty strong arguments about why that might not be the best path. You might have a different recommendation and different decision. But I think that council looked at that and decided not to do that. We can talk about the reasons why another time if you want, but
I'd be curious to know.
because I was all about that too. I was like, why wouldn't we do that? Because when we do rental licenses if an owner, like a private owner wants to rent their house, they have to meet certain energy efficiency requirements. It's actually quite stringent. And I'm like, if we're going to do that for energy efficiency, why would we do that for affordability? If we care about that just as much. And I have been persuaded that maybe that's not the best path. And again, I don't want to take up your time tonight talking about that, but I'd be happy to talk about the pros and cons that we talked about in planning board and I've talked about offline with people.
So that might be a future discussion.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if you want to, I don't want to, I mean, this is your meeting. And
I would like to hear that.
Yeah, I think we need an agenda item in December to flush out some of these ideas. And maybe everyone could give it some thought. Maybe I'll send the memo out. Try to see some discussion and we'll be ready to roll. Oh, and I can't assume it's a December 6th meeting yet, but that's the next item on the agenda.
I think publicly noticing it would be good too, because you get some comments on that from the people who were supporting the occupancy change and why they did not like the idea of tying it to affordability. And you get that directly from them rather than.
Right, that was just the notion that I'm reporting on, not ready to go to a recommendation on that. Anytime soon. Well, we have plenty of time tonight. I think I don't want to rush it. We could also move on unless others want to add more about the letter and topics. Again, we can have a really robust discussion on this at our next meeting.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to sit on it
Okay.
till the next.
We'll wait until you have final.
Can I make one suggestion in line with what you were talking about, Michael? In
Sure.
terms of, revisiting some of council's decisions from this term in terms of effectiveness and any additional tweaks. I think council did sometimes say, hey, there should be a phase 2, and here are the things that could happen in a phase 2, like we're not ready to approve it now. And I don't know if staff are somehow maintaining a list of all of those things that have like a phase 2 suggestion, but maybe you'd want to look at and support or not support some of those things.
Phase 2 sounds a little friendlier, doesn't it?
I think that, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can I make it?
Go ahead, Phil. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, one way to think about a letter of recommendation to city council is contemplating, and I don't remember how this works, and I've never been through this process before, but the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan is due to be, the wheels for updating that are gonna start turning here soon, and we should kind of like understand what that process is and what the calendar's like, and anticipate having recommendations to city council for, updates to the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, because this has been a theme that keeps coming up, right? Is like, when we asked Carl to, consider maybe more aggressively updating the zoning, he was like, well, we're kind of doing this within the bounds of what's in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. So I just wanted to say that as kind of like an umbrella, idea to kind of shape our conversation.
Well, that's a really great thought and we're on it. We've talked about having a presentation of Danny and Jay that I met recently, and we're like, this comp plan thing working in there, it's really confusing. So we're gonna have an educational session, I think, in January with Christopher, our long range planner, correct?
Long-range planning manager.
And he's going to talk about how the comp plan works, how it can be updated, and areas where we might be influential. So thank you for reminding us about that, because we've got it coming up.
So that's part of the phase 2 concept, right? So there's a lot of work that council tried to get done with this council before the elections. And so when something controversial came up, they were like, well, maybe that's a phase 2. But the comp plan is a really big phase 2. So the comp plan is really key, if you want to unlock more potential for additional units on the site. And I think it's related to everything that you were just describing.
And remind me, what is the timeline roughly for like it's 5 years, right?
Every
So-
5 years, last update was 2020.
Okay,
So they're preparing in 2024 for the 2025 update.
great. Thank you.
Which probably not until 2027. That's okay.
It's not a major update, it's a minor update, so.
10 years of the majors,
Yeah,
so 20 and then 30 is the major.
or maybe it's the other way around, I can't remember.
That's right.
Uh,
So
Sorry.
does that mean if it's a major versus a minor, could they go, oh, no, we can't do that because it's only a minor?
You can have that in January.
Okay. Great.
There's certain things that are categorized as major and certain things that are categorized. as minor.
Let's say you want a major update, minor policy point.
Workarounds.
Anyway, that'll be a great discussion. I mean, I look forward to learning more about it myself because top line is like thinking about the cosmos. It's a big, we understand it, then especially me. Okay, any other thoughts before we go over to agenda item B and C?
I just provide a little bit more context, so, the letter, like I said, we don't know what the questions are gonna be yet. But, just thinking about what do you think are the important work plan items? And so the tab member that came and talked about, getting rid of our parking minimums and establishing parking maximums. She also talked about strengthening our transportation management program. So everything you guys were just talking about. And the city does this in certain districts. So Boulder Junction, every single person has an eco pass and has access to car sharing. And used to have great access to transit. So maybe hopefully that'll come back again. We're gonna do the same thing at Alpine Ballpark. So I mean, there are tools out there and we are using them. But the question is, how do you expand that? And so you can also invite a transportation planner to come and talk about it. They'd love to share all the data that they collect every year about travel habits. So, I mean, they do an extensive data collection to track what are the annual bike trips this year versus last year. So, the pandemic definitely threw a wrench in all that. But I think we're getting back on track a little bit.
If we do a joint meeting with Tab, or would that be?
That's on my list.
So
That's been
basic for them.
suggested. Parking, to talk about parking specifically. But I think from my perspective, if I was on council and I saw that both HAB and TAB talked about, we think one of your most important projects should be dealing with parking and TDM. That would be pretty powerful.
Can you remind us, if you're familiar with it, what are some of the parking and transit innovations planned for Alpine Falls?
It's going to be very similar to Boulder Junction, so we're not providing any parking on site for the affordable housing buildings. So basically, everybody gets a transit pass, everybody has access to ride share or car sharing of some sort. The affordable units, there's some weird tax law about you cannot charge additional for an affordable unit. But part of our sump principles, so let's remember that. So what is it? Sump, unmanaged, bundled, unpaid. So it's shared, so you don't get your own parking space, you have to share it. Unbundled, it can't be basically rolled into your rent, you have to pay extra. So that way you make a conscious choice to have a car. It's all managed and you have to pay for it. So that's the basic, those are the 4 principles of Boulder's parking demand strategy. And that'll be applied at Alpine Falls, and they'll create a district that'll have a group that will oversee how it's administered and run, and make sure that there's money in the district to pay for these services. Is that?
And
answer your
everyone
question?
gets eco passes, car share available. Great, and the parking ratios proposed there.
I don't remember but the parking was basically, what's in the existing parking right now. The parking structure right there. Over here. Yep. Thank you.
Michael, may I just suggest if you're going to do a joint meeting with TAB, planning board might also be interested if that is something that is people interested in.
Pardon?
I personally would love it. I can't speak for the whole planning board. You'd have to, talk to the chair and the co-chair and the staff and see if that would work, but I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, and if I'm hearing Jay right, focus in on a topic like parking.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, let's make that happen in 20.
Especially if you are thinking of potentially supporting those recommendations that TAB is talking about with the work plan, that they already have there, kind of like, here's the key work plan item that we think is focusing on the parking and the TF, transportation demand management. They did ask us at planning board if we as individuals wanted to sign on to their letter to council. But I think having a joint session to talk about that, because there is a lot of interest on planning board on, what do we require with parking and what is that doing to our affordability and things like that.
Yeah, it could be as simple as just having it on the HAB agenda and inviting the other board members. That way you don't have to coordinate and figure out who's adopting minutes and who's running the meeting.
That's
We need
genius.
a guest expert to kind of help lead the discussion, somebody from transportation department.
Absolutely.
Anyone you recommend?
Go with the director.
Good. Great.
She's fantastic.
Get on the red phone. Okay, anything else on item A? Item B, I've already mentioned, it would be probably sensible for us to fold the November and December meetings into one meeting. Possible date is Wednesday, December 6th. We can discuss that. Everybody want to check their calendars and see if they're available on December 6th.
I would just have a request that we would consider December 13th instead. On the 6th, the Boulder Chamber is hosting a thing for women, young girls, and Jenna Griswold is going to be there speaking. To take my daughter, she doesn't know it yet.
Okay, everyone, let's do another calendar check and guess there's no reason we couldn't have it a week later, except it gets a little bit into the holiday season, but we don't
The
want anyone-
13th is preferred for me.
I'm sorry, the 13th?
It's better for me.
Okay, good to know.
It should work for me.
Is that after school semester?
I'm hoping it's the day of my final. They usually do it on the Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Fine.
Would anyone like to make a motion regarding canceling the November meeting and having a folded in meeting on Wednesday, December 13th?
So
Second,
Second,
all in favor? So the motion passes unanimously, so put it in your calendar, Wednesday, December 13th. Thank you, everybody.
is this gonna be like a holiday meeting where we have it offsite, or is this like?
No, this is a meeting.
Meeting.
I think we should have a outside.
Offsite different
We
day.
can talk about that.
Okay, that's right, it's not official.
Thank you, everybody. Item D, updates. We got two listed. There could be others, of course. The airport, I haven't heard anything encouraging about creating a great new neighborhood at the airport lately. But I wonder if anybody who's been involved, the working group, et cetera, would have a more precise and detailed update.
I have not heard any scuttlebutt about the airport. So I have nothing to add.
I can just summarize that the community working group is done. They're
Okay.
finished. No more meetings for that. And staff is in a period of work as directed by council at the last study session that they had. And, you know, their main focus is going to be looking at feasibility and cost of converting the airport to a neighborhood. And so that research is underway, and that research will be presented to the new council in the first quarter. And so I think things are kind of in a holding pattern until after the election and the new council is in place. I do think that the positions of many of the candidates who are likely to get elected is quite favorable to repurposing the airport, or at least they are open to that. And so I think that after the election is finished and we know who our new council is, that would be the time to start trying to talk to people and, you know, send letters and express an opinion if HAB has one about that.
And is part of that research also including like the viability or feasibility of buying out the FAA, or is that part of the costs you were mentioning?
Yes, so
Okay.
the cost, so here, I'll grab my notebook. Here's what Natalie said at the last community working group meeting. It might take me a second to locate it, but she said that, let's see. What they're gonna focus on is one, legal analysis of what is the potential likelihood of prevailing in a lawsuit against the FAA to get decommissioned? Like, what have other airports done? How is their situation the same or different than ours legally? So, you know, they're talking to outside counsel basically who've done this before, because the FAA is not going to let the airport go willingly. They just don't ever. do
For
that.
sure. So it will be, have to
It
go
would
through a
be
lawsuit.
pretty much
Okay.
guaranteed. The FAA
Okay.
will say no. And if Boulder wants to decommission the airport, there would be litigation. So there's a legal analysis that's happening about, you know, what are the risks and costs of litigation and how likely would the city be to prevail given our unique circumstances. Talk against the FAA and get their perspective, and perhaps have the FAA come and speak to council. And then a financial analysis of what would it cost to continue down the road of decommissioning for closure, including if the city had to operate and maintain the airport without FAA funding for a period of years, what would that cost? And if we are required to reimburse the FAA for land, which is a question mark, the FAA helped us to purchase some land. There were certain contracts in place at the time that happened. The FAA would like to retroactively apply some current policy to that. So there's a question of whether that's legal or not. Would a court agree that the FAA can do that? But if we had to reimburse the land purchases, what would that cost?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I suppose that also plays into the comp plan discussion.
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know if, so the airport manager has said that they're planning to do an airport master plan update in 2025. And that has always been described as separate from the comp plan. And I think they have tried to keep it separate, but Jay may know better.
I would imagine it would be separate.
Yeah.
And then whatever area plan determines for the zoning and land use. Then they would do an update, automatic update, with the next comp plan update.
So I think it's included in the East Boulder sub-community plan. So, yeah. But the airport manager's position, as far as I can tell, is that he believes that he will need to operate the airport for the indefinite future, and he's rolling ahead with a airport master plan as if the airport is going to continue. So that's scheduled for 2025. And it would take the direction of council to do anything different.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any airport insights?
So Dan, George.
Oh, Danny's here. Hi, Danny.
Hiya. Sorry, I'm late
See you.
and virtual, but
You in Breckenridge, Glenwood, one of those places?
yes. Yes. I was all the way out on the western slope, but now I'm back home. So
Well, I'll, no one minds, I'll do a quick review. We have a full deck of HAB members here. We had a quorum from the get-go. Philip has also joined us virtually. We had a discussion, we had no public participation. We had a discussion about the letter to the new council, which we're probably gonna want to send in January. We need to see who the new council is first.
Yeah.
And get a sense of what they're looking for. We already talked about some topics we might want to include in a letter. One would be how to bring down the cost of building affordable housing, which, as you know, is really expensive, even if you're doing smallish multifamily units. Another is, how can we deal with, land costs, other opportunities to rededicate surplus land the city owns or to rezone underused parking lots in ways that they could become future housing similar to what's happening at Diagonal Plaza. But basically it's an opening gambit, and we also have voted to move our to cancel our November meeting as we did last year and have a single meeting end of year, December 13th. Does that work for you, Danny?
Yes,
Oh, good, good news. Works for everybody. And at that meeting, we're gonna have an agenda item about what we might want to put in the letter, and everyone's gonna give it a lot of thought before then.
okay,
We just got into the updates. The airport update is kind of go away. Don't talk about housing at the airport. No, not really. It's complicated, as you know. But let's just say there's no plans to turn the airport into a neighborhood at this point. And I was just about to talk about Boulder Junction phase 2. And anybody else has updates, free to add them. So I was on the multi.
as a point of clarification, just to make sure that I heard right.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
is it just almost like a given that the FAA will litigate against the city if we try to close down the airport?
Laura can answer that because she just talked about that.
Yeah,
I think
Sorry, I'm
that's
sorry.
true. I think every community that has successfully closed an airport has had to go through litigation. So yes, that would be part of the process. The
jeez.
FAA will not let it go willingly.
Okay, all right. Thanks. I just want to make sure I heard that right. 'Cause it's like,
Yeah, I think so. So at
you
the
will
council
have
study
an
session-
airport.
I
Don't like
think. I think at the council study session, there were some council members who were of the opinion that it is just impossible to close the airport and we should stop talking about it.
Right.
But where it landed was we need to do more research and investigate the feasibility and see what it would cost to try to shut it down and how long would it take and what are the risks, like legal risks. So that is what staff is currently investigating. And then that research will be presented to the new council. So I would definitely not say that the idea of a new neighborhood is dead. I certainly don't consider it to be dead. I'm still interested in discussing it. I think we're in kind of a holding pattern where some research is being done and while the new council is not yet elected.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, I'm probably talk about it all day, so let's keep the conversation going. Another thing we talked about is the forthcoming minor update to the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. And that's will provide some opportunities for HAB to weigh in on some issues, as we've discussed in previous meetings. Some things we would like to recommend are just not possible until the comp plan is amended. If you recall that conversation with Carl Geiler.
Yep.
So that's something we can talk about in December, and then we're also going to have Christopher Johnson, the long-range planner, come do a presentation about the comp plan in January. That's tentative. He's confirmed. He's well, not tentative, actually happening. And then that'll give us a better idea where that conversation might go, including thoughts we can put into a letter to council. So do you have any thoughts about comp plan and what's coming up, Danny?
Nothing in particular, but several thoughts, but hopefully, it will enable us to kind of go down the path on some of the things that the city's already started in a little more detail once we have, the comp plan going, so.
Great. Boulder Junction, or TBAT phase 2, I was on the multi-board working group, which wrapped up its work for now in the fall. Both planning board and city council voted unanimously to adopt Boulder Junction phase 2 amendments in the transit village area plan. I'm actually reading from a note from Christopher Johnson here. The next step will be to formally update the Boulder Valley Comp Plan land use map, which we hope to complete before the end of the year. So that's different than updating the whole comp plan.
Different thing.
And that's something that will happen imminently from the sounds of it. It is possible that the multi-board working group will continue their Christopher's team is thinking about that through, but may continue to be involved through that. So as we discussed, I was pretty happy with the outcome on that because phase two of Boulder Junction could very well have a lot of new housing. And that's something that I think as a board, we were very much in favor of, obviously.
Yep.
Anyone else need to add an update topic? Going once. Item 6, matters from staff. Okay, I guess it's what.
Yeah, so I just wanted to start out by reiterating how much has been accomplished by the city in the past 2 years. It's actually pretty, I'm impressed. Just in terms of the number of projects we got through, so, a lot of it in the last few months. But the inclusionary housing update does go to council on the 2nd of November, so there'll be a public hearing. Hopefully that'll get adopted as well. One of the last meetings before the new council. The following week is going to be a study session discussing the board and commission evaluation that was done. You remember, hopefully everybody participated in that survey or did something. But anyway, so the consultant took all of your feedback and basically has written a report, and that'll get shared out as part of that study session. So I would definitely recommend you take a look at that. And I think it should be pretty interesting. And then what else? So the 2 of you have terms coming up. So Terry and Aaron, yeah, yours is up as well. But the applications are open. I strongly encourage you to reapply. You'll most likely get reappointed.
My term is up.
Yours is up
When?
next year.
Like at the end of next year?
No,
Like right now?
yeah,
Like next meeting?
March.
no, March.
March.
March. I didn't think that's
Where
forever.
has it been?
Been 5 years.
Keep it.
We've had so much fun, it didn't feel like 5 years.
Just goes by fast.
I hope you re-up.
Yeah, we might re-up. Oh,
5 years.
please consider reapplying. Oh.
Okay, sorry.
So the applications will go out mid-December. Council typically,
Makes decisions in February and then
you get seated in March. Every year there are questions. So Karen and Karen, you both remember, you most recently did this. They check with the boards and commissions every year to make sure we want to have the same questions. And based on what the feedback that I saw from the consultant report and what we heard from what they heard from all the boards and commission members across the city, was that applying for a board and commission seat was almost like a job. Just in terms of the amount of time and effort and that went into it. So I was going to suggest that we might want to reduce the number of questions. And I'll put them up and you can see them. To me, they sound a bit redundant. Juliana, you probably still remember, you were
Yeah,
there.
I do remember there being a lot of questions, but it led me to take it seriously, which is good. Yeah, as if I was applying for a professional position, something to put on my resume.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I do think that, I mean, I don't have any problem looking at the questions again, but I do think if that taking the time to think through the issues and come up with answers helps council to evaluate whether someone would be a valued contributing member to the board. Because if the questions were too easy, like, why isn't there affordable, like, we should have more affordable housing, like it's some of the solutions are naive if you don't understand all of the issues underlying it. And so I think that having questions that at least let city council understand the thought process is really important to ensure that we have a board that can provide really good insight and suggestions.
someone who's gonna reapply would answer all the same questions, right?
Mhm.
I'm wondering if that should be different.
Well, they've already answered last year, so.
Right. Yeah, so I'm wondering if it should be like, why you wanna continue your term for another 5 years, or, you know, ask those kinds of questions, like,
It's the same application.
yeah.
So wait, could we look at the questions again and make a recommendation like,
To you right
I
now.
think these are relevant or not relevant or redundant?
There are a couple of people made good points that I hadn't thought of.
And I knew it was a long year, I just didn't realize that it was gonna be up that. quickly.
Last round, I don't remember how many applications we got, but we had a good number of applications and they were really thoughtful. But we really did well with the people who were selected. But there were other good candidates, so I don't see how people were being discouraged from applying by having a detailed application.
Maybe think about it differently. So, you guys have the time and the means to spend a lot of, effort. So if we do want more diversity in our boards and commissions, this is a way to get it, because not everybody has that same luxury that I would say many of our boards and commission members have.
I think that is a fair point. And also the reality of being on a board, it takes time to thought, to learn and obviously. And so how do you balance the effort that it takes to get on the board with the effort that it's going to take to be a board member? And it does weed people out, right? And we talked about that a lot on planning board, that it's, it's almost like a day or two of work a week to prepare and conduct the planning board meeting and do any follow-up and all that. And that is going to exclude some people because of just the amount of work of the board. This one seems a bit lighter, like it probably doesn't take quite as much of your time every month. So maybe it could be an easier lift for people who don't have as much time to spare.
So our board has, just drilling down a little bit, has some balance. We've got gender balance, certainly. We have some folks who rent, not everybody is a homeowner. We have a student.
Well, it's a requirement to have a renter.
Okay, that's right. But we probably haven't done that well with ethnicity, people of color. So one of the points you're driving in, Jay, we can do better.
Do you have any requirements about people who live in affordable housing? That seems like that would be a very useful thing to have in your board membership.
So when I was on a board, I was on the Boulder Housing Partners Board, and we actually came up with a matrix and said, if this board is going to be advising the institution, then it would be good to have a developer, a lawyer, someone who knew financial stuff, a tenant, someone who is a resident, so it wasn't just gender and ethnicity, it was also the skill set that can help provide some insight. I am so looking forward to hearing what Terry has to say about the various costs that go into a unit, because I don't know them as well. I'm not a developer, I'm a banker. So I do think that, yes, it would be great to have more diversity, but I also think that there are other criteria that should be evaluated to decide who gets on the board.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, we have other required positions in addition to having a.
No, when we formed this board, that was actually the staff recommendation, was to have people with specific expertise, architecture, design, finance, and council was like, no, we don't want that. It should be open to everybody. So it sort of begs the question, what is the purpose of the city's boards and commissions? Is it to provide, to have experts who are familiar with this subject matter to provide advice to city council? Or is it to help them with their broader community engagement? And so anyway, there's a good conversation. And I think this is what council's going to discuss in 2 weeks. That's why I would encourage you to think about it between now and then, and even potentially share some thoughts that you might have. Because I think you can influence it.
Outreach to folks who, for example, live in BHP housing. To say, hey, we really want you to apply for a board.
Well, that's an interesting question too, because so staff isn't really involved in recruiting or in evaluating. It's all done centralized through this city clerk's office.
Right, but basically there's an announcement, and whoever sees the announcement decides whether they want to
Exactly.
apply or not, so.
I didn't see an announcement, by the way.
How would you find it?
It was either a past planning board member or possibly the city mayor. I don't know. But I didn't receive any notification. It was more word
Yes.
of mouth of just somebody who I happen to know.
No, I mean, you're not gonna get an email from the city. But it is publicized in all their different social media channels.
I guess as far as trying to be more inclusionary and trying to reach more people. Unless they're surfing the city website. You might not come across it.
Can I share a thought based on my experience in the East Boulder Working Group? So that group went above and beyond. I had never been a part of, and I facilitate public process for a living. I've never been a part of a public process where they made such an effort to include people who lived in a disadvantaged community and were bilingual. That whole process was conducted bilingually in simultaneous interpretation. Materials were translated. Staff sat down. 2 community connectors who actually sat on the East Boulder Subcommunity Working Group, and staff would sit down with them before each meeting, help make sure that they felt prepared to understand the topics because they weren't experts in planning, right? They are community connectors that are connected to those communities. And so there's a lot of jargon being slung around and all of that. And then they got feedback from those community connectors. And so it might be useful to talk to Jean Gatza about what that experience was, because my impression is that the community connectors kind of felt like sitting through all those meetings and being involved at the very granular level was not a great use of their time, and it was a big burden on them. Like it was part of their job to be there, but people were having to like be on the phone in their car during meeting times because they had childcare responsibilities or work responsibilities, and that participating through interpretation was quite difficult, and they didn't really feel like part of the group. And so they moved more towards the model that the airport working group used, where they had separate meetings with the community that were held Spanish first, where the English speakers were the ones who were receiving the interpretation and the presentations were being given in Spanish. Mm-hmm. It's not quite the same equivalent, but I'm wondering if there's some way that I've been trying to include one by the community for the boards and commissions. If the people who sit on the boards are largely the people with specific expertise, but that there's some way to connect with the communities on specific topics and have very focused sessions that are less of a demand on people's time. Maybe there's some kind of hybrid model that might work better for some of the boards that are more intensive or more policy wonky, where you're probably unlikely to get someone who has certain diversity characteristics, but is not an expert in a certain field that is tied to that board. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really touchy subject, right? Because you want to be inclusive, and you also don't want someone to be tokenized and like you're only here because you represent a certain community, even though this topic is not particularly anything that you're interested in or work in, or anything like that. So it's a really hard topic to even talk about, let alone figure out how to do. I'm gonna stop it. Sorry, rambling.
Well, I want it to be a welcoming place for anybody to apply. Question is, how do we do that? Simplifying the application is one means. But is that even something we get to recommend on, or?
Yeah. Oh, the questions is the only thing that you do have control over. I mean, your point's well taken. The questions makes you take it seriously. But I would say having to go in front of city council is much more intimidating than filling out an application. So,
Yeah,
So these are are there 10 questions? Like, where's number 1?
1 through 4 are the same for every single board. These are the ones that are specific.
I could see getting rid of 7. So I don't know how many people know the initiatives.
But
It's
shouldn't
very
you look
visible.
into that if you want to? I mean,
Yeah.
it's if it's readily available, maybe if there's some way to prompt people to edify themselves on some of those things if they need to, but I think the whole notion of, you know, familiarizing yourself with some of that stuff is kind of important, right? So
Could there be a link to a website? Like, is there a website that gives
Yeah.
an overview of the city's housing initiatives?
Mhm.
like that would be great if there was a link or something, so to the extent somebody, you know, wants to learn that, they have that opportunity, they don't have to try to just find that generically, but I think, you know, the context, I mean, I think they're good questions. I'm pretty sure, you know, I'm not as way back as Terry, but I'm getting close. But I'm pretty sure that was pretty similar to the questions that I had back in 2018 or whatever it was. I mean, I think they're pretty salient.
I reviewed this list last week. I think I did suggest. In addition, or maybe it's folded in another question. Something about what's your experience with housing policy, if. Maybe that's. Too demanding, I don't know, but. It'd be interesting to have someone say, I've served on an HOA board or. You know, something.
Jay, is it identified anywhere what? It said something about like why this board came together
Mhm.
originally and what the goal was, is that? Can you tell us a little bit, like, so what was it? Was it meant to be representative of?
It's a little unclear. So there was a demand from certain council members at the time. To have a board that could, and to be perfectly honest, I think the desire was to have. A group where the community would go and hash out the issues before it came to council.
Okay.
So that hasn't happened. So, and I think that's partially why. They resisted having expertise on the board. Because they thought it is more of a community engagement apparatus.
Okay.
And so. But if, I mean, that's the basic. And they wanted it to do more, but there was this tension between. Okay, we already have a planning board. Who is responsible, has statutory responsibility for. Reviewing developments, we need to draw a clear distinction between the housing advisory. And the planning board does.
Okay.
So that's the other piece. So it really left kind of just focusing on housing policy. And being purely advisory to city council. I don't know if that helps much, but.
Thought of another question. You know, what you think of this, do you think functions effectively, and if not, how would you improve it? Other than replacing the chair.
It'd be challenging for somebody who's
Well, I mean,
not familiar with
I can
that.
tell you, okay, well, that was my point. At least they would watch a HAB meeting before they would.
Yeah.
That's not asking too much, I don't think.
I can tell you, you shocked me by telling me we've been here 5 years. I can't believe that, but I can tell you that without question, the last year or 2 years has been drastically different than the first year or two, and in a very positive way. Very, very positive. I think what we're doing now, whatever the intent was to form the board, what we're doing now is very good. It's very logical. It's productive. It's helpful. It's great. I think the direction and the things that are happening here compared to 3 years ago, we were here till midnight talking about whatever, you know,
Yeah.
it's way better.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
I mean, literally, we were till like 11:30 a few times, because everybody just wanted to talk about like, I don't even know what. You know?
Well, it's gratifying that other people are getting something out of it as well as everything they put into it. But my question is, would you feel better about a candidate who had actually paid attention enough to watch a couple of ad meetings, even if they were going online?
Oh, yeah.
Watching the recordings. I think that putting that to them is not asking too much.
I don't think so either. I mean, especially if you have, you know, like I said, the opportunity to avail yourself of a little bit of insight, you know, ahead of time. So if you haven't done that ahead of time, you know, if we have links or whatever on there, so somebody could kind of get that background if they want to be on the board, at least having some of that background would seem to me to be a pivotal first step.
So
I like what you said, I'm sorry, I like what you said, Karen, about whatever board you referenced earlier, you have people with expertise in different categories. I think that's really helpful. Really helpful.
Isn't necessarily what.
I know that's
Jake
opposite of
says.
what Jay just said, I know that, but
Yeah.
So I think totally side note, it's like, to me, a jury should have knowledge of the topic that they're reviewing. You know, but that's just me.
They're the first ones to get it.
The first ones to go. You know, I know that's not the same, but to me, that sounded great, like, you could, okay, there's a question about finance, you can phone that person, there's a question about bill. And you get some real life knowledge and expertise about what you're talking about, and not kind of talking like, well, we don't know. Anyway.
Well, I think that's been a real restraint to have to say, talk to us about financing housing, talk to us about developing and the legal front and others who bring their own expertise to it, but if we can't require
No, I just think it's great.
it. Well, you can require it. I thought council had to set those.
Theoretically, well, that's why I keep mentioning the boards and commissions evaluation. Is this is the opportunity to reevaluate all of our boards and commissions. And determine how effective are they, how could they be more effective? And how do we redesign the process potentially?
Remind me, there was concern from the city that they're not getting as many applications as they once did, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, last year, the last several years, they've had unfilled vacancies in several boards and commissions.
I think that's worse on the boards where they have specific things like some of the district commissions, you have to be a property, you have to start engaging the property owner. Those needs go on play. DAB, I don't know if DAB has specific expertise that they have to fill. Do they have any trouble filling their seats?
I don't know enough about design advisory boards. So.
You know, I wonder if you could just say, these are the recommended expertise that we would like to have on the board, but it's not a requirement that you have one seat for an attorney and one seat for a banker and one seat for a developer. One seat for a student and, you know.
Well, yes, all that. But back to this, do we want to, are we talking about possibly changing some of these questions right now? Is that the?
So that's the question to the group, and you know, there used to only be 2 or 3. And then every time I think I brought this back to the group, they've added, and that's the tendency.
You want somebody to want it enough to have to sit down and think it through and answer the question. But you don't also want it to be like a barrier to entry where if somebody looks at this and goes, I don't want to deal with that. So where's the balance, right? Yep.
Well, in my mind, filling out this application took me about as long as attending a board meeting, right? Like, I spent the time and effort to like write it, edit it, go to the website, try and find out what the housing initiatives were. And it was, for me, it was a couple hours. So like, if you're not willing to spend that time, then you're probably not willing to spend the time that this board meeting is.
That's true.
Well, my recommendation is just keep it as is.
Yeah, don't, if it ain't broke, don't break it.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the, I don't see any of these questions as a barrier to participation. And like I said, if there's something to you know, make it a little easier to you know, edify yourself in terms of, you know, some of the things here, some of the housing initiatives, some of the functions of the board, all the better. But I don't see any of these as a barrier on any sort of um, uh, different, consideration group either, from any different perspective. It's pretty generic, pretty, broad policy perspective kind of things. And I think let's think about one of the reasons why we have these questions too, which is to give the city council an opportunity to get some insight into, what people's philosophies are and how they engage in these issues, so they can decide who's qualified to serve on the board. So from that perspective too, I think they're very useful. So I wouldn't tinker with it. I mean, I think it works well.
All right.
Jay, when you said, keep it as is, you mean what's up on the screen or the currents? There's something we need to think about voting on, or we just sort of reach consensus?
As long as you guys are okay with not making changes.
I think if we were a board that was having problems recruiting, then maybe you tweak that, but if historically there's been enough applicants to have a good sort of competition to get, you have choices about who you select, then maybe we don't change it.
So we had a lot of applications last time, but what's the historical pattern? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, there's never been a lack of candidates, I would say. I mean, housing has been a big issue for at least since it was formed. I mean, that's why it was formed.
I also think if people watch this board operate over the last, 6-8 months, it's more inviting, whereas before people would call me and be like, what's it like to be on that board? Should I apply? Now it's different.
And I mean, boards and commissions are a reflection of city council, it's they appoint.
Yeah.
So, the reason why I have struggled in the beginning was, well, it was a new board. It took a while to get their feet under them. But also there are people who, that were appointed specifically for their views on housing.
Here we are.
I was making an observation that those questions, I think, would probably be intimidating to someone who isn't already working or having a knowledge of housing policy. Like, what should be the top 3 priorities for housing? How can we accelerate the creation of a diversity of housing types? If somebody didn't already have specific knowledge, they probably would feel like they didn't belong. So it is skewing towards expertise more so than community representation. Which is choice.
Which begs the question, like, what would the questions have to be to result in more community engagement and diversity?
I think there was.
So I don't think it's just the questions, is my point. It's everything. It's the whole process. And like I said, have an interview with city council.
In my
Any
opinion, I
questions?
think it's just, I think it's just the promotion of boards and commissions. Like I wouldn't have known about it if it weren't for word of mouth. I don't know about most of you, but I think they could do a much better job promoting that and letting people know that these positions are up for election. And
I think that's a good idea. Jay, are there suggestions for how to make it less intimidating, the interview with city council? I know they tried last year with Zoom interviews with just one council member rather than you have to, like when I interviewed for planning board, it was like, go to city council chambers, sit at a long table with all the candidates. Here's city council in front of you, and they're going to go down the line and ask you each a question, right? Which is different. Are there changes being proposed?
Read the report.
Okay.
When is the report coming out? Second week of November?
It's the November's thing. November 9th, so a study session packets come out 2 weeks before. So it should be pretty soon.
Next week.
will there be opportunity for open comment when they talk about that?
It's a study session, but you can send emails,
Okay.
certainly to council.
Yeah, Mike.
Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I have something I want to say before we adjourn, but it's not directly related to this item we're talking about right now.
That's all I have for stuff from
Well,
staff.
before you get there, I'll just say I'm generally okay with these questions, but I would like maybe one leading question indicate, asking if the applicant has actually followed what app does, at least to the point of attending one meeting. That's not the question. Maybe it's something like I said, how do you think HAB functions and how could it be improved? They would have to watch a meeting to be able to answer that question. So Philip, please.
Yeah, thank you. I've had one of my little speeches brewing and I'd like permission to rant for a little bit, if that's okay.
Did we enjoy that?
Those, it's pro automobile.
Say what?
Those, pro automobile. Kidding, Phil. I
yeah,
wanted you here. Gotta see what I drove.
I want to say that I think we've had a really productive year, and I'm proud of what we've done. I've really enjoyed participating. I think, when you think about how technology advances, often what occurs, what happens is what is referred to as adjacent possible. Like, we do this thing now and we look one step over and we see we could do this other thing incrementally better. And I would say, like, most of the changes that we've pushed for are kind of fall under that category of adjacent possible. We updated the ADUs, we updated occupancy, and I feel great about that. I think we ought to make incremental progress. But I would also like to have some of our effort, some of our mind share around solving big problems, taking leaps forward. I mean, we talk about the fact that we have a climate crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have a crisis of affordability, and lots of people displaced in North America that are looking for refuge and for safe places. And I would like Boulder to be a welcoming, inclusive place that welcomes people. And so when I look around my city and I'm walking through it, there's things about it that just drive me crazy. And I'm sure I've ranted about this before, but I see 40-foot wide streets everywhere I go, and I can't stop seeing them. And they're generally vacant. There's not. I mean, in some neighborhoods, there's this car bumper to bumper, which is, something I've joked about is there's only one thing that makes me more upset than a full parking lot, and that's an empty one. And I feel kind of the same way about streets. If streets are being used, awesome. But there's a ton of asphalt in this city that's just not being used. So that's kind of but that's, maybe that's an aesthetic thing. It's a land use decision. We have issues around land costs, right? And the value of land. And we don't, we kind of, where we sit as an advisory board for a city council for a state, we don't really think about how to tackle land use or land values in a way that would kind of upset the system or change it in a meaningful way. But I'd like to spend some mind share, really. People write about this stuff. It's mostly economists, and it's theoretical, and it's not really part of the public discourse. But if we took some time to do some research and tackle some of these bigger questions. So I've written a few other things down. Another thing that drives me crazy is we have tens of thousands of empty bedrooms in our city. And are there ways to think about incentivizing, making better use of the housing that we have? We have mobile home parks that appear to me to be in a kind of in a shrink wrap state where they don't change much. And I kind of understand why they don't change much, but I would think that people living in mobile homes, especially people who own their own mobile homes, might want to have opportunities to think about how they can improve the property value or improve those neighborhoods are like. And I'm not talking from experience, like I don't know much about mobile homes. We actually kind of like set them over here as this separate thing. And when we talk about that, there's no affordable housing. We just assume that, well, excluding mobile homes, right? But you know, they're a very large source of market rate affordable housing. So the meta, oh, and the other thing that I just crave is I want, you know, instead of 4 blocks of Pearl Street, I want a whole district, you know, a square mile of pedestrian district that has lots of livable places and, you know, more mixed use above a lot of businesses, and mixed use, that is to say, more housing above commercial retail. So one thing that I think might be kind of something I would like to engage in, you know, I was part of the airport community working group, and that's kind of a long range, big problem kind of a thing in its own way. But I just wonder if there's any appetite for, you know, maybe doing a research initiative. The thing that kind of like comes at me the biggest, it has to do with land value and thinking about it from the terms of, you know, from the perspective of an economist, and you know, what are possible recommendations we could make to the city, to the state, that we could lobby for, you know, to Joe Neguse and our Congress people around reforming the way land values work, and you know, solutions like community land trusts or tax reform and various other things that have been proposed. So anyways, I love the adjacent possible stuff. It's fun and we can make progress on it, but I'd also like to like spin some cycles shooting for the moon. Rant over, I think.
Wow. We really enjoy and learn a lot from your rant, so keep ranting. I was smirking or giggling a little bit there because Jonah Goose came out as Jonah Goose on the we did talk a little bit about mobile homes when we did our tour and learned a lot about Mapleton. It was fascinating, and that I don't recall all the details, but I do recall that part of the deal, other than having the land price stabilized, which is so crucial in preserving the affordability of mobile home parks, is that they have been able to make improvements, infrastructure improvements around flood control, for example, and other improvements there. So it's just a great model. And then I think you were on the tour last year when we saw the transformation of a low quality, I mean, like not a nice place to live, mobile home park into much higher quality permanent housing, which has also been done at Red Oak Park in Belmont. If you've ever gone and looked at that, it's a fantastic award-winning project, and deservedly so. I love the idea, and we talked about land values a little bit earlier, and anything we can do. I'm not an economist, but I feel like most economists would probably say, you know, that's a problem because the market drives that, and it's driven the land values really, really high, Boulder. So how do we work around that? Where are the opportunities? And that's a great conversation.
So Philip, I don't know if you joined before or after, but I think at our next meeting, we're going to talk about ways to reduce the cost of a unit, right? Like, because recently new construction has been about $700,000 a door. And we had a discussion about how a significant portion of that cost is land. So it may be that next meeting, you should come prepared to talk about what are some ways of reducing land costs. So it might be ground leases or land trusts, or I don't know what other ideas you had, but I think that some of what you're talking about is what we want to hear about at our next meeting.
I did hear that discussion, and I'm glad you kind of circled back to that and gave me that invitation. That's a great challenge. I'm willing to do that. I also kind of feel like, you know, for some of these bigger questions, like maybe we should, have a subcommittee or like, have a thread that lasts a few months that requires some research and some experts to come in and discuss with us. And but yeah, I'm happy to, spitball about land values next month too. I'm not an economist either. I just play one on a podcast.
I love the idea of subcommittees, and that's something that seemed to work pretty well when I came to them 2.5 years ago. I've experienced a lot of appetite for forming subcommittees, but we can go back there. See if people would like to do it in the future and tackle a specific issue like land trusts or whatever it might be. So maybe that'll come up in December. Or if you'd like to volunteer to form a committee, Bill, perhaps someone would want to join with you.
Listen, I love the download. It's great, but I mean, those are like 6 different topics. We could spend a year talking about each one of them, So I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I already commented on the car light, car free. I was telling to Philip and telling him that I recently went to Mackinac Island and Lake Huron. There's no cars there. And I thought, it's just gonna be this cute little resorty place, and it is. But I mean, they really have figured out how to get around without cars. It's very cool. And you know what? They use a lot of horses. There are these horse carts everywhere. Some of them are taxis, some of them are moving furniture or bringing food to the grocery store. A lot of bikes too, and it's walkable. So I thought it was, wow, you could actually design a neighborhood around these same principles, maybe just surround it with a giant lake or something, but.
With a distinct smell.
I was really amazed at how well it worked, and it was more than a gimmick. It really was like a way of life that they preserved carefully for 125 years.
Thanks for letting me rant.
Harry, you actually mentioned something before the meeting officially started about zoning for affordable housing, and if you could bring that up again.
I came in hot.
Thoughts.
So without getting into too much specifics, what Carl Geiler did so quickly, which was pretty impressive, because tweaking the zoning code is typically, from my experience, something that takes forever to do. And maybe he was working on it for a really long time and nobody knew about it or whatever. I don't know. But bottom line is it got done. And the impacts of that are real. They're opportunities, again, without getting specifics. Hypothetical project, 7 single-family homes under the zoning before Carl's tweaks. Now you could probably do 8 or 9 or maybe 10 attached townhome style homes, a little bit smaller, but more units on the same property. A better product, I think, for what we're trying to accomplish as a community. And it's great. It's just really great. The tweaks that Carl suggested and the planning board adopted and city council adopted have a real impact. Real, tangible, solid impact, which is not always the case. But this is, at least in this one specific tiny micro example, which is great. Really, really good. Now, you can take that a step farther. What did you call it? Adjacent or whatever it was, and say that still half of the site is just green because you're limited in how much you can build there, and you could probably build twice as much if it was tweaked more, which then segues into what we talked about earlier, phase 2 of maybe Carl Geiler zoning tweaks phase 2. Because you could still do so much more on this particular parcel. But at least it's more than what it was before, so that's progress. That's good. Really good. Go Carl. And planning board and council and everybody for approving it.
And thank you. That's really great to have that good news. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I will say that zoning for affordable housing is one of those ones where, like Lauren Folkert suggested 5 or 6 specific tweaks that council said, well, that's probably too much for this update, but let's put it in phase 2. And I'm sure those are in a bucket somewhere. If planning or if the advisory board wanted to look at Lauren's specific suggestions and boost them up or say, yes, this should be a priority, like go put this in your next work plan. That could be something that you might want to look at.
We absolutely should keep doing it because the right thing, and it's not overburdening neighborhoods, and it's not changing the dynamics or culture of whatever. It's just common sense when you look at it.
Great example of phase two, like how do we build on that moving forward? You can split lots all day, townhomes. It's chipping away, but not solving the affordability problem because townhomes, you know, they still sell for $2 and $3 billion.
But better than 3 and 4 billion.
Well, right. You're not getting the missing middle there. You're getting like missing, you know,
The only way
rich.
you're gonna get the missing middle is by de-restricting it. There's not happening in the free market.
Yeah.
But I think the other part is it also can really have a, you know, zoning changes like that can have a really profound effect and just the whole mindset. And that goes more to, you know, some of the things that Philip was alluding to in terms of thinking broader, thinking bigger, and some of these policy changes that you make can start to change the base presumptions that you have. There's a lot of base presumptions in land use, you know, it's like, okay, density is bad, et cetera, right? You know, that just kind of, you know, just get a foothold in there and then just stay that way, regardless if they make sense or not. You know, another one is roads, the width of roads, parking, a lot of the things that we've talked about, a lot of those things, even forward-thinking jurisdictions really have a hard time letting go of. I mean, parking is a great one. I can tell you, I've had that so many times, and I thought it was really helpful, the presentation that we had, you know, months ago on parking. But when the rubber hits the road, yeah, I'm dealing with so many different jurisdictions right now. And it's incredible how many people, you know, they can have general conversations about that, but then when you still come down to it, and it's like, well, 2 spaces per bedroom, and, you know, but that's the kind of thing. And I think the zoning for affordable housing and everything that Terry was alluding to is a great example of that, where once you start changing the mindset, then there's a you know, significant amount of possibilities of where you can go from there, because it's changing some of these base presumptions. Like, you know, the best thing to do is to have one single family home on there, have, you know, an abundance of yard area, et cetera, right? Once you start changing those things, then you can get there. So I think what Terry was bringing up does go to some of the notions that Philip had of thinking in more grand terms, which, you know, I think at least maybe picking an issue or two a year, Philip, would be a great way to at least start with that, right? You know, our bandwidth's kind of limited, and we have a lot of things that are kind of nuts and bolts here and now, and that are also very important. But at least, you know, doing something in that direction as well can be really helpful, because that's where you really start to see profound changes. And, you know, maybe allowing more density and allowing attached units isn't going to make sure that those units are going to be less expensive, but it's going to start a progression where you get towards more of a contemplation of those things. So I was very encouraged, and Terry, it's encouraging to hear that you know, the pragmatic effect is there as well already. I was very encouraged to see a lot of the things that were done this year, you know, by the city. And you know, I think it is a good start, and it's something that can really, you know, have a phase two that can have even more substance.
Notes to myself. Cool. Anything else in the update department? Some good ones there. Some good thinking.
I think we've addressed most of them.
Good.
I was asked whether I had any more updates to the letter, but I think we. I don't have them. Oh, no, that was my idea of less expensive housing. Gotcha. That's a good one. Yeah.
Ready? Let's see. Do we have any other matters from staff beyond? Nope. Okay. Are you ready for the debrief meeting, or does anyone else have anything else in general they'd like to say? Okay, 7:45. Had a good meeting. We had no public participation. We talked about the council letter. We'll get into the details of that at our December meeting. We agreed to reschedule the November meeting to December 13th. We had updates on the airport and Boulder Junction Phase 2. We had a good discussion about the best way to get to ensure diversity and robust numbers of applicants to city boards, especially our own board have. And concluded that having a simplified list of questions is a good way to go. We had some general thoughts about things to move forward on in the future. Maybe making recommendations to policy changes that have already been made as kind of a phase 2 to tweak and improve. Areas like occupancy and zoning for affordable housing, also something that we can get into in more detail in future meetings. Had a full roster of members attending tonight, which I'm very pleased to see. And calendar check, we've already done that. We're going to meet again on December 13th. We're also going to discuss a time to have a social gathering to celebrate the holidays. All of your good work have. So.
Can I just add one thing that we decided not to change the questions on our application?
I think we reached consensus, even though I was a little nudgy about it. There would not change any questions.
So no November meeting, instead December 13th.
December 13th, correct.
There we go.
And no December meeting.
Right.
Can I ask a clarifying question about the calendar?
Sure.
I noticed that in I think January, there's 5 Wednesdays. Is it usually the 4th Wednesday or the last Wednesday? I don't remember.
Fourth.
Fourth.
4th. Okay. I'm gonna pencil in the dates for next year.
This is not 6.
Well, Tiffany will typically send the meeting invites to everybody with the location and everything. So she'll send you an update for December 13th. Hopefully we'll get this room. You already checked. All right, we'll be here. Perfect.
This is great. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, does anyone have anything at all they would like to add? Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second,
Second.
Chairman is second, all in favor?
All right.
And then 45.
Just if you so happy or the holiday gathering, do it on the 13th. And right after the meeting.
That sounds great to me.
Yeah, good call.
If we do it before the meeting, it'd be a great meeting.
I'm open to
Just
that.
go over to the town afterward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great.
Votes. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
So Karen, I have had this debate with many, many commission members over the years.
Yeah.
This is what